So the frost-free date is May 15th for the majority of our listening area. I think everywhere we're heard. You can't mess around with frost-free date. There are tricks, but this year it's not going to be that much of a difference. So let's try to break this down. So the classification of freeze temperatures are based on their effect on plants, obviously. Like a light freeze is 29 to 32, which we had this week, and tender plants would get killed. If you tried to beat the clock and try to put in, like vinca or impatiens or peppers or eggplant, they're dead. Moderate freeze is a little more severe, very destructive, and that it can even be destructive to certain plants that you would think would be fine. Like if there's new growth on any plant, like if you know like a magnolia, like a saucer magnolia, the ones that are usually pink or purple and they bloom real early, that kind of temperature will turn those flowers into banana peels, and rotted banana peels at that, because they all fall off and they make a mess, and it's pretty bad. So we were close to that this week. And a severe freeze is 24 degrees or colder, heavy damage to a lot of plants. So that's something. Now, ancient times, let's go back. Like we have come from an agrarian society. You may not think it now, but at one time you would track the seasons by the lunar calendar. So the moon, I mean, you would know, like, there are different types of moons that would usher in each season. So there's a pink moon, and the native people, Native Americans, they observed the seasons and gave them each different names. And the time was recorded by using the months. And as a result, many of the traditional names that you'll see, like in things like the Old Farmer's Almanac, come from Native Americans who interacted with the American colonies. So April 12th's full moon is called the pink moon. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see that we have some mountain pinks that are in the studio, in which we're going to talk about mountain pinks specifically in just a bit, but they're called moss pinks or wild ground phlox. But in this part of the country, they're called mountain pinks. And they're basically a phlox subulata, that it is a creeping phlox. And that's where it gets, when the pinks are in bloom, is where that pink moon comes from. Now, what does that mean? It means there still is likely a chance of a frost, but it's getting close, that you can plant some of the hardier vegetables, things like cabbage and kale and lettuce and all of those early vegetables, Brussels sprouts, and they can all be planted now. Even like we have some strawberries here in the studio. You could plant strawberries. If it gets to be that severe cold, they need to be covered. So just keep that in mind. Now, this was the key. This is the key one, and this is what we rely on. The last full moon before May 15th. If that is, say, May 10th, the frost-free date, we at Bloomers are pretty confident that last frost occurs during that last full moon before May 15th. So this year, though, it's May 12th. So there's likelihood that May 12th may have a chance of frost. So you've got to be careful. And again, it's important just to watch that. And why the moon? Because there's radiant cooling that happens when there's a full moon. If it's cloudy, it's not as big a deal, but generally it's clear skies, and that clear skies where all of that radiant cooling happens, and it gets cold at night. Okay. Now that May 12th moon is called the flower moon, and obviously for reasons that there are things that you can plant after that flower moon because, again, it's the likely the last frost before May 15th. So, again, right now, you can plant some types of flowers without too much fear of them getting damaged. Petunias you can plant. You can plant snapdragons. There's dianthus. There's Dusty Miller. There's stock. Even portulaca and lobelia are pretty are going to be pretty secure even when it's as cold as it is. Now, tender annuals, you got to be disciplined and not plant these plants until after that flower moon on May 12th. We're talking about impatiens, begonias, ageratum. Gosh, ageratum. If it gets a frost on it, it looks dead. The leaves get all brown and black. Oh, it's awful. Salvia, coleus. Coleus absolutely hates that because if you ever look at coleus stems real close, it looks like they're filled with water. And it's one of those things that doesn't like it. Sweet potato vine goes like the ageratum. It just disappears. Geraniums, you shouldn't plant them because it will stunt them if they go through a cold snap. So again, wait until after that flower moon on May 12th. Vegetables, soft vegetables, what we call them, tender vegetables, if you will, basil, eggplant, peppers, tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, beans, all those, gotta wait. You have to wait until, again, they call it that flower moon that happens on May 12th. And again, check the forecast. I mean, when it was so cold this week, I was checking the forecast like at 3 a.m. And again, it's, the coldest before the dawn, and it sure was. And that was 29 degrees, and that was right about at 6. It was cold. It was really cold. But what about like you've got tulips coming up or daffodils or hyacinths? Those are fine. Those are fine, especially if they're planted. Anything that's planted and established, Mother Nature knows what it's doing. You just leave it alone. Don't, especially with bulbs. If you planted your bulbs in the fall and they're coming up now, don't try to cover them. You'll probably do more damage to the flower buds because either they are in bloom or they're shortly going to be in bloom. And if you try to drag a frost blanket over top or something like that, you're going to hurt them more than anything else. Now, if you have something soft that you just planted, that's another story that you may need to do that. People are asking us for things like, do you have southern magnolias yet? And the answer is no. Southern magnolias, believe it or not, come from the south. I mean, they originally were not hardy in this area, and between good breeding and good science, there are varieties that are hardy here. Like we can grow camellias. We didn't used to be able to grow camellias. We can grow crepe myrtles. We didn't used to grow crepe myrtles. But the issue is those generally come from either a southern or a western climate. And at Bloomer's Home and Garden Center, we don't bring those things in until our weather kind of matches up. And the earliest that would come in would be like the 15th of April. But if you've noticed, it's been cold. It has been cold. We had a nice snap where it was in the 70s. We're going to get some nice weather this week coming up. But it's going back to where it's in the 20s and 30s at night. We need to watch the skies. Last year at this time, it was in the 70s. It was in the 70s. And that the actual historical average temperature right now is 10 degrees warmer than it's been. So we're in the 50s during the day, right? We're supposed to be in the lower to mid 60s. So,
and to your point, I was reading in the Farmer's Almanac, and I thank you for putting me onto that, man. Right?
Down on the board.
A few years ago, to your point, they did say that our winter was going to be unusually cold, and early spring was going to be very cold.
There you go.
And I think average now we're about 10 to 15 degrees below.
Yep.
On an average for about 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
Outside of that 75 degree snap that we had. So, yeah, to your point, man, Be careful. May 12th. I always say May 12th, man. You're safe. It's baseball season, man.
I mean, as a kid, we always learned it was May 15th. May 15th is a frost-free date, but we always, didn't tell anybody, but we went by that flower moon.
Gotcha.
And whenever that flower moon hit, that's when that radiant last real cold snap had potential. So,
in my household, it was, I think it was Mother's Day weekend was the weekend where we started doing our planting.
But Mother's Day can be.
It could be.
It fluctuates.
Right.
It fluctuates all over the place.
You're right.
So, but be careful on some of the shrubs that you may be buying new, because if there's some of the southern style shrubs that are brought in, like there's two methods of thought. As a nurseryman, I want to bring them in from the southern climates or the West Coast, and we're talking about Northern California, and that when they're dormant, so that they open as the weather calls them into opening. But for instance, we get our southern magnolias and our crepe myrtles and such from Georgia, and I just visited. That's from Monrovia Nursery, and I just visited their facility in Georgia, and it was great. But they had 8 inches of snow. They don't get snow because they're not far from Tallahassee. That they don't get snow, but they had 8 inches of snow, and why was that a problem? Because it tore down all of their shade cloth that they had. Because they grow also tropical plants like bougainvillea and hibiscus, and they're actually had rubber trees, or so they're starting to grow some house plants in that area. But it ripped it all down, and that they were replacing it all. So weather's got to watch the weather. Got to watch the weather. They never have snow like that, but
when they do get it, when they do, it shuts everything down.
Oh, it does. They don't know what to do.
I didn't tell you, my wife and my daughter, Ava, had an audition in Atlanta a couple months ago, and they got caught down there for 2 days in snow. Couldn't come back because of an inch and a half of snow.
That's crazy.
Shut everything down. They were stuck in a hotel, had to get another day. And so, it's crazy how they're not equipped, but,
no salt, no shovels.
But the plants that come, when they come into our area, it's like I always tell people when they come in, it's like you want to have them, you want your plants to mimic the environment that they were born in or raised in, and ultimately, as a businessman, it makes great sense that you would do that, bringing them in and wanting them to come in and not sit there and potentially die as a result, or, come in and just be damaged. We don't want to sell damaged products.
Right. It's tricks of the trade. After doing it now for almost 40 years, it's I'm starting to get it figured out. I don't know. We'll see.
Absolutely. Not exactly a pro yet. But no. Plant pro, my man.
With the covering, if you're going to cover, we always have said, and I think last week or the week before we talked a little bit about this, if you're going to cover plants, use cloth, use paper, don't use plastic. Plastic will transfer everywhere it touches the plant. If it's the ambient temperature is 29 degrees, where it's touching the plant will be 29 degrees. You want to create that insulation barrier. When you're using cloth or paper, it has a natural insulation to the fabric, and that it won't transfer that freezing temperature. So a fan of cloth, paper, but not of plastic. So again, it's almost time to plant those soft vegetables and flowers, but you gotta just hold on until that May 12th moon is passed. That you can do. There's plenty to do out there. There's lots of perennials that you can plant, and there's lots of other different vegetables that you can plant. So there's plenty to do, but don't try to play chicken with the tender annuals and vegetables, because you will lose.